In this clip, we'll learn how to create and apply both materials and textures to the various surfaces of our model. Okay, so you can see that the spacecraft that I'm working with in this scene has a consistent neutral gray color to all the pieces of it. Now, this is perfectly normal. This is the default look for all geometry that's created here inside of Maya. Now, if we want to begin taking this ship to the next level, making it look a bit more realistic, then we need to think about defining unique looks for each of the pieces of our ship. These particular wings could be a cloth material. The body could be metal. The visor could be glass. So we need to begin a process known as shading, in which we create unique materials and potentially use some texture maps to define the looks of these surfaces. In fact, there's an entire environment built right into Maya for this shading process. It's called the hypershade, and we can get to it by clicking on this small blue sphere with a white dot. We'll go ahead and open that up here, and you'll see that this completely fills my screen. This is actually a floating window on top of Maya. We could move over to maybe a second monitor if we needed to. You can see that there are a number of different areas inside this interface. This topmost area on the left is called the library, and this is where all of the materials, the lights, the textures, the cameras, things of that nature that exist in our scene can be found. You can see here on the Materials tab, I actually have 4 materials that exist inside this scene. Now, this first material right here, this background material, this is a material that is assigned to a piece of geometry that is actually hidden in my scene via a display layer. This particular geometry is a background plate that has a texture map placed upon it. We'll work with textures here in just a moment, but let's talk about these 3 materials here. These are all default materials that come with every new Maya scene. So my advice to you would be, don't change anything with these. Just pretend they're not there. This Lambert 1 material right here, this is actually the material that controls the look of every new piece of geometry that we create. So what we ideally want to do here is we want to create unique new materials for each of the pieces of our ship. We can do that right down here in the Create bar. And you can see there is a category system for how the various elements are organized. Now, I have a Favorites, a Maya, and an Arnold rollout here. Now, if you're using another production renderer besides Arnold, maybe V-Ray or RenderMan, then you'll likely have a rollout for that as well. So let's come over here under Maya and go to the Surface category. We're going to come in here and find the Lambert surface. And there it is right there. We'll just left click on that. You can see a couple of things happened. We added a Lambert 2 up here inside of our library. And we also added a couple of little boxes right here. This is called the work area or the graph. This is where nodes are placed that will eventually be connected together to form what Maya calls a shading network. You can see the 2 nodes that were created when I added this Lambert material are the material node itself here, and then this Lambert 2 SG node. This is a shading group. Now, word of warning, never delete any selected node from your graph unless you want to remove it completely from your scene. Deleting with the delete key is a destructive action, and it could potentially break a shading network. What you want to do instead, if we wanted to remove a node, is simply come up here and click on this little button with the minus sign next to it. We click on that, and we can remove that particular node from our graph. Now you can navigate in the graph just as if it were a viewport with the Alt button and the right click to zoom and the middle mouse button and Alt button to pan. Okay, let's customize this material. I'm going to come in here and call it something like wings underscore material. Now I moved over here to the right, and this is called the property editor. This actually has 2 different views. I'm currently in Look Dev view that shows me the most commonly used attributes in the selected node. We can toggle this with this button over to Attribute Editor view, which gives us significantly more attributes, or access to those rather. I'm going to stick with Look Dev View for right now. And you can see that the default color for this particular material is gray. Maybe I want my wings to be kind of a light tan color. All we need to do in order to set that is simply click on that swatch and come over here and mix our color in the little color wheel. So maybe we go with something that looks like that. All right, great. So there are some other attributes here. There is transparency. We're not going to need that for the wings, but you can see here up above in the material viewer, as I increase the transparency slider, the material, or the shader ball rather, slowly disappears. The material becomes more transparent. We could add an ambient color if we wanted to, or we can come in and add some incandescence if we want the material to glow. I think this material will be just fine for the wings as it is, so let's go ahead and get this applied to the geometry. Now we can do that without ever leaving the hypershade, simply by coming to the window menu and opening up a viewport. Now this viewport is rather large. I do kind of like to come and drag this and dock it into the interface of the hypershade, and you can do that just simply by dragging it around until you see those highlighted areas. And then we can adjust the frame some if we want to get a little bit more visibility there. You'll also notice that I'm in wireframe mode, and we can fix that by simply coming over here to the shading menu and choosing Smooth Shade All. All right, great. So the first method for applying a material to a model that I want to show you is the drag and drop method, or the middle click method. So we can middle click on the material either in the library or in the graph, and we can simply drag it to the geometry we want to target. And you can see the color changes. Let me do it from the graph for this smaller rear wing. There we go. Just that simple. Now that's great for one mesh at a time, but if you have multiple meshes that you want to assign the same material to, you can go ahead and make a selection of those by shift clicking, and then come over to the material and choose right click and assign material to selection. Okay, great. So now you know a couple of different techniques for assigning materials to geometry. Let's go ahead and clear the work area out and start over here so we can create a second material. We can do that by clicking on this button here, and that'll just clear the work area out. By the way, if you ever want to get to one of these materials again so you can look at all the nodes that make up the shading network for it, all you need to do is middle click and drag down here like so, and then click this button right here, which will expose any incoming connections or outgoing connections from the node. Okay, we'll go ahead and clear that off again, and I'm going to come back over to my Maya surfaces and add a blend. For this blend, we could go ahead and give it a name of something like body material. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a color here of kind of a bluish gray. All right, great. So looking here at the attributes inside the property editor, you'll see that several of them are the same. The blend material, however, has some extended attributes for specular shading. And if we were going to assign this, say, to the body of our ship and wanted it to be sort of a metal material, maybe we would want to come in and make some changes to the specular color here so that the highlight has more of a tint in the same color as the material. So maybe we come over here and just give that sort of a light blue tint, sort of like so. Now there are some other controls here like eccentricity. That is going to control the crispness of the specular highlights here. I'm just going to orbit around so you can see this highlight right here, and watch what happens when I lower that eccentricity value. Those highlights become much more crisp. And to contrast that, if I increase that, they're going to spread out more. Now this is going to provide the illusion that the surface is more rough and the highlights are being scattered more. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull that back down to right about there. And the specular roll-off, you can see here, if I begin to adjust that, it's going to control kind of the intensity of that highlight. So if we wanted a less prominent highlight, we could go with something like that. Or if we wanted a brighter highlight, we could really dial that up. I'm going to go here, and again we can come over and middle click and drag to drop that onto the geometry. So you can see how we've assigned a couple of custom materials to these surfaces. Now, to wrap this video up, I really wanted to show you how we can start to take our shading process to the next level, and it involves something called a texture map. Now, a texture map is simply a 2D image that we're wrapping around a 3D object. And we can actually use that particular image to drive several of the attributes here inside of our shader. I'm going to come over here to my color attribute for the blend material, and I'm going to simply click on this checkerboard box right here. You'll notice this Create Render Node box pops up, and we're going to go for a 2D texture, and I'm going to choose File. You'll notice down here inside my graph, our shading network is starting to get a little bit larger. We now have 4 nodes that are all connected together for this material. So with this file node selected, we can come over to the image name and select the yellow folder. That opened up on my other monitor. Let me just drag it over, and I'm going to select my source images folder for this project, and I'll choose the base color for the body. There's the texture map. We'll hit open on that, and you can see the material has come to life over here inside my material viewer, but we're not really seeing anything in the viewport here. This is because hardware texturing isn't turned on. We can find that under the shading menu down here near the bottom. It's actually also the 6 key on your keyboard. And now we can see here that that texture map is being wrapped around and successfully driving the color attribute of this blend material. All right, fantastic. So in this video, we've learned how to create custom materials and textures and apply them to the surfaces of our Maya models.